it's something we've been talking about for years and years, and there's always been a lot of interest in it. But I think the last few years it's really kind of developed and evolved. And now there's a direct link to results and specifically sales, isn't there? Typically, a celebrity, somebody on Towie or Made in Chelsea would charge, I don't know, £20,000. They'd do a tweet for some teeth whitening product, and that's it. You know, and people would expect some kind of return from that. But I think the market's a lot more sophisticated now, isn't it?
I think that says more about who Will listens to and what he downloads than anything else.
Well, what was Kim? At one point, Kim Kardashian wasn't she like $1 million for a tweet or something? Tweet. It was absolutely insane. And what kind of return could you possibly get? You think of Kim Kardashian's audience.
Yeah.
Are they going to be 100% tuned into what your product represents?
Welcome to Socially Unacceptable, from F***ups to Fame, the marketing podcast that celebrates the professional mishaps, mistakes and misjudgments while delivering valuable marketing and life lessons in the time it takes you to eat your lunch.
Hi everybody, thanks for downloading Socially Unacceptable, the podcast that celebrates mistakes, mishaps and, yes, you've guessed it, fuck-ups. I'm your host, Chris Norton, and I'm joined by my good friend, William Ockenden. How are you this morning, William?
Yeah, not bad, thank you.
So if you've heard the podcast before, you'll know it comes out every other Tuesday. But this one is a bonus episode. It's from one of our recent events, and the event is completely sold out and has been. So we wanted to do a podcast like we did previously on the social video one. So this one's called Influencer Marketing Hacks 2024, and we're going to be focusing on how to get the most from influencer marketing. So you interested in this one, Will?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting topic, isn't it, influencer marketing? And I think it's something we've been talking about for years and years, and there's always been a lot of interest in it. But I think the last few years it's really kind of developed and evolved, and now there's a direct link to results and specifically sales, isn't there, from influencer marketing campaigns. And I think when we delivered this as a webinar, some really interesting debate around it. So I suppose as a starting point, there's a few themes, isn't there, that we see from kind of senior marketers or marketers when it comes to influencer relations.
You know, influencer marketing is important, but you don't have the time or knowledge to know where to start. So there's loads of marketers out there that are thinking, oh, I want to do influencer marketing. Oh, I'll just throw some money at a particular influencer or whatever. Well, it doesn't work like that, does it?
No, that's right. And I think the old days was very much the kind of Kardashian school of influencer marketing, where it's typically a celebrity, somebody on Towie or Made in Chelsea would charge, I don't know, £20,000. They'd do a tweet for some teeth whitening product, and that's it. You know, and people would expect some kind of return from that. But I think the market's a lot more sophisticated now, isn't it?
I think that says more about who Will listens to and what he downloads than anything else.
Well, what was Kim? At one point, Kim Kardashian wasn't she like $1 million for a tweet or something? Tweet. It was absolutely insane. And what kind of return could you possibly get? You think of Kim Kardashian's audience.
Yeah. Are
they going to be 100% tuned into what your product represents?
Well, she was obviously worth every penny. The other things that we hear are your current approach to influencers isn't driving the results you need to, very much like what Will's just talked about there. Or you're struggling to understand how influencers fit within your broader marketing strategy. So before we get started then, I've got a couple of plugs for the show. So this is the Influencer Marketing Hacks podcast, as I said, but we've also got several webinars. We've got the full webinar, which is much more in depth, and you can find that on our website, which is prohibitionpr.co.uk, and just click on the events section. We've got about 15 on-demand events there. If you like the content of the show, hopefully you do. Another plug, if you fancy a discovery session with either Will or myself to talk through a 50-minute chat on what you're doing with your business and where you want to go, you can catch us and book a session quite easily on bit.ly/sociallyua. That's bit.ly/sociallyua. And that's me done. Other than, please subscribe to the show. If you like what you hear today, apart from my jokes and Will just, humouring me all the way through it, please do subscribe to us on YouTube or on your wherever you get your podcasts, because we appreciate and we read every comment and appreciate every like. We really do. So thanks. Let's get on with the pod then.
And if you If as the listener you hear that we're slightly distracted, our producer has just started eating a pot noodle directly in front of us, and I can see it out the corner of my eye.
What flavour's the pot noodle? Classic.
Classic. Yeah, I can hear the slurping as we present. So apologies for that.
Are we going to snip at that bit? I don't know. Right. So why work with influencers then? Well, there's a huge interest. There's 400. We've got here some of the statistics that we've pulled out here. If you like statistics, this is for you. 400% increases in search for influencer marketing in the UK.
Yeah, that's right. So massive uplift in interest in influencer marketing for sure. What I find interesting is it's actually directly influencing people's views of brands. Another stat I find really interesting, half of millennials actually trust influencer recommendations over all other forms of advertising. So it's really getting the lion's share of trust when it comes to other marketing disciplines.
Yeah, so more and more people are using influencer recommendations to buy products or recommend products, and that's so true. We see it in my office. We'll do a straw poll across the office, and people buying things from TikTok. And when we did the TikTok webinar, it amazed me how many bloody people are actually buying product. They see it on TikTok. Oh yeah, I've got to get one of them.
Yeah, it's years ago for anyone old enough. You used to get they called it the Delia effect when Delia Smith.
Where are you? Let's be having you.
One of my favorite ever YouTube videos there. But also the Grazia effect. Brands used to get featured in Grazia and it would sell out for 2 weeks. But now we're seeing that on TikTok, which is fascinating.
Yeah, well, you see it with PR as well. But another statistic we've got is 60% more engagement comes from micro-influencers. So we talk a bit about influencers and the different types. There's 3 different types of influencers, but micro-influencers are the small ones, and you get more engagement. So they don't have as big a reach, but the engagement that you get with the people that they do reach is much, much better. So
yeah, and that's a really interesting point. I think a few years ago, everyone assumed you had to go massive and you had to go celebrity and you had to spend 10 grand on an influencer, but that's just not the case anymore.
33% of Generation Z bought an influencer recommended product in the past 3 months. So there you go. A third of Gen Z have bought an influencer recommended product. That goes back to what I was just saying about TikTok and people in the office just saying, oh yeah, I've seen that. A third.
That's right. Yeah. The vast majority of us follow influencers on social media. I think that's a bit of a no-brainer, but alongside our friends and alongside brands, influencers are now taking up a lot of our feeds. And then finally, 37% of brands use influencer marketing to increase sales. And I would say, Chris, probably the big trend in the last couple of years is brands really tapping into influencer marketing to sell. I think a few years ago, it was really kind of about web traffic or brand awareness, but people are really seeing the opportunity to sell products, aren't they, now through
and they're looking for more from, instead of like just the one-off project, because they don't work as well. If you're wanting to do, you need to be doing influencer relations, you need to pick the authenticity of the influencer, and they need to fit your brand appropriately rather than just the quick win hit. This is, when we say 37%, that's just over a third want to just increase sales from it. So you're right. It is that's what it's about. It can be about sales, but it's got to be authentic, I think, for the relationship to work.
But that point you mentioned there, this kind of shift to influencer relations away from influencer marketing, that's absolutely the way things are going as well, isn't it? And that's brands working with influencers in a much more kind of meaningful long-term way, rather than this kind of one-hit wonder that you talked about. And I think, again, that's the natural development and evolution of influencer marketing. It's got some statistics here. This is from Influencer Marketing Hub and e-commerce Fastlane. So 90% of influencer marketers find that creator campaigns produce as good or better returns than all other marketing mediums. I'm a bit dubious about this, Will. 90% of influencer marketers find that creator campaigns get good or better returns. Is that self-serving, that statistic, or do you believe it? I'm not sure it's as high as 90%, but the thing worth mentioning, actually, influencer marketing doesn't always operate in a silo, does it? All good influencer campaigns would have a paid social bolt-on, for example. So, ultimately, it's probably several disciplines working together. Also,
marketers find that influencer-generated content receives an average of 8 times more engagement than branded content. That is true. I mean, that statistic is true. Branded content on your own social channels, or whether you're an individual, celebrity, or a brand, will get engagement. But content that's authentic and comes from an influencer or somebody that is a brand advocate gets much more better engagement. And often we will say to a client to use that content as part of your paid social.
Yeah, and that's a really smart way of looking at it, isn't it? Actually testing content with influencers and then taking the best performing influencer content and actually using that as the basis of e-commerce ads, and actually ad algorithms work in a really similar way to organic algorithms. And those ads will do much better. So that's we'll come on to that later, actually. But that's a really smart way of getting more for less when it comes to influencers.
Yeah, and so the big thing we've seen on influencers is a lot of clients when they're looking at this. Like, we got this on the TikTok session when we were discussing TikTok. Some brands, they're like, "Oh, we're B2B. We don't do TikTok. It's too young." Well, the age, as we made the point in the TikTok session, the age demographic is shifting, because obviously as a platform becomes more and more embedded in society, how people use it, the age moves across. Like Facebook is everybody, but now Generation Z, are they even using Facebook? Are they only posting on Facebook just as part of their?
Well, let's ask Zach.
Let's ask Zach. Zach should have his own mic.
He's shaking
you
his
could have
head.
been our guest. Do you use it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So Zach is, how old's Zach? About 15 years old? 16
12,
years
I'd
old?
say.
Doesn't use Facebook. But
He's putting his bullying report
sorry.
in.
Sorry about that, Zach. We're breaking, is this called breaking the fourth wall?
This
what
is
we're doing
bands.
now? But what's quite interesting here, we actually put in chief execs as well to look at how they engage with influencers. And again, one of the conversations we've been having a lot over the last year or so is B2B brands saying, look, I get it, influencers work, but not for B2B. But that's not true.
No,
and
not true at all.
influencers absolutely work in B2B. So if you look at chief execs of all ages engage with influencers, and it follows a very similar trend to the general population.
Yeah, it's not as high, but I mean, you can see that. When we were looking at the latest statistics, percentage that engage with influencers on social media, more than 12% of over 45-year-olds are doing that, and about 7% of CEOs over 45 to 54. That's 7% of people engaging with influencers. That is quite interesting. It is showing that it is having an effect. And obviously, the further down the pipeline, the younger you get, the more it goes up. But actually, when you're looking at CEOs, because obviously, I suppose a CEO, with the age demographic, 25 to 34, is probably where you start being either an MD, a CEO, or whatever. And that is at about 18% that are engaging with. So nearly a fifth engaging with influencers on social media. It shows it works, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's now a mainstream medium, I think is the message here. And this is the point we made earlier. So, 86% of B2B brands now estimate that they find success with influencer marketing. I'm not sure how you would define success, but the types of things B2B brands are doing when it comes to influencer marketing, and this is certainly representative of the kind of work and approach we're advising our B2B clients on. It's not product placement and things like that, but it's things like roundtables. So if you've got a number of subject matter experts, get them in the room, get them debating or discussing a paper you're releasing or something like that. That's a big use of influencers. Jointly writing white papers or reports, expert analysis and consultancy. So if you're launching a new product or proposition, getting some industry experts or influencers involved in that process. Equally, there is a kind of a brand/product piece as well, isn't there, when it comes to B2B? It's not the same as launching, I don't know, a new biscuit brand or some crisps or something like that. But if you're a telecoms company launching a new broadband product, for example, influencers are increasingly being used to kind of amplify that.
Yeah, I mean, we were approached a few years ago now. It was about 4 or 5 years ago to do a B2B influencer mapping exercise. So we do Prohibition. We do influencer mapping where we'll identify influencers that are authentic and fit the relevant brand. And this was for a brand that shall remain nameless, but was an office chair brand, and because they wanted to use influencers that would, that could use office chairs in the B2B environment. And we'll talk about how comfortable and flexible and portable and good for your back and So it does work depending on. It doesn't matter whether you're B2B or B2C. Like you're saying there, well, you can do it for both. I mean, the people know it. Influencer marketing. They're thinking of your Kim Kardashians and your various your Love Island celebrities, but actually. No, influencers can work it. You can have shed. When we used to work on Ronseal, we used to have shed experts, and when we had pet food brands,
Shed blog. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
The world's #1 shed blog.
Give us a shout out from the shed. I wonder if the shed blog still exists.
But I think the
Man
point.
Cave. It's probably man caves now, isn't it?
Yeah. The point is, with these influencers in B2B, though, it's not. It looks different to a B2C influencer, doesn't it? You're much likely to be a much more niche networked individual. Typically, it could be a broadcaster or a professor or, some sort of subject matter expert, as opposed to somebody that's on TV or got a kind of an element of celebrity about them.
So B2C, you've got all the usual things you can do, such as brand awareness and reach with influencer marketing, sales, which we've touched on already, content creation. It brings some personality, obviously, if you get a celebrity to be involved in it or an influencer. And then obviously you can get some genuine marketing insight from a sector. If you ask influencers will tell you what they think about the product, and they might give you some user-generated content, which is, as we touched on before, really can be a lot more powerful than content that's on the brand page. User-generated content from an influencer you're going to get, surely with having them in it, you're going to get better engagement.
So the interesting one for me there actually is content creation. So I think particularly in B2C influencer relations, it's actually presenting your brand, but through the eyes of somebody else. So you're essentially presenting your brand through the eyes of the customer or from a different perspective.
So, Will, I remember when we did a campaign recently, we were analysing what was quite an interesting B2B campaign. We've put it into a deck which we'll share with people. But and it was a TikTok campaign for the Institute of Chartered Accountants. Okay, don't switch off and stop downloading now. The Institute of Chartered Certified Accountants can be interesting, and the idea was to challenge, I'm sure you're young as well, to young people's perceptions of the profession and drive interest in having a career as an accountant.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? I think a few years ago, an accountancy industry body using influencers for a campaign, and not only that, but using TikTok for a campaign to drive recruitment would be absolutely unheard of. But actually, this campaign, hugely successful, drive a huge amount of views. In the eyes of the Gen Z audience, absolutely kind of repositioned quite rightly the accountancy profession, and actually drove real results as well. So 15% engagement rate on the posts, but actually they were running a recruitment event, and they credit this with this being the most successful ever recruitment event that they've run, thanks to the TikTok campaign. So, and we're seeing this everywhere, really, aren't we? A lot of brands are using influencers, specifically TikTok, for recruitment, to build the employer brand, to kind of reposition.
But they're trying to make it entertaining. Like the key is, if you're a brand out there and you're B2B, don't think I'll just stick my corporate video on TikTok and it'll fly. It won't. It won't work. But if you make it, if you're thinking about entertaining someone with short, sharp, snappy content, it can. But it's not something. It's not as difficult. But it's all people just think, it's not as easy as just getting a camera and taking a TikTok, though, is it?
No,
You've got to have a strategy behind it.
Yeah, I mean, in brief, the strategy is, if you imagine the sales funnel, about 60% of your TikTok content should be trending and engagement content. So it's presenting your brand, and this might be a challenge to you, and you might feel like you're compromising your brand actually as well, but it's presenting the brand in an entertaining way that taps into trends. And then probably 30 to 40% of the content becomes about selling, about defining what your product is. So essentially it's driving people through that sales funnel. So it's about finding out ways how your brand can entertain. And if an accountancy industry body can do it, I'm sure your brand can do it as well.
I mean, I'd love to see me and you doing those crazy dances. There is some dancing, obviously TikTok's involved, so there is some crazy dancing, but actually the videos were a bit wacky, but the influencers they used, it worked, and they actually got tangible business results from it, which is what a lot of people argued, if I do a TikTok video, what am I going to get out of it? Well, because there was a strategy behind it, it worked. And
we're going to talk about TikTok in a bit more detail later, but it's, in terms of kind of growth platforms for influencers, TikTok is hot right now, isn't it?
It is. Check out my 8th video that'll be on tomorrow.
Yeah, the newest after your 2-week holiday. You're now a TikTok influencer.
Anyway, jokes aside. Right, so now we're going to go through some tips for using influencer marketing. So tip 1 then, what have we got, Will?
So this can be applied to all sorts of parts of marketing really, but it's about being super clear on your objectives and why you are doing something. So I think if you're vague about why you want to do something, there's no way you can understand what success looks like. So the clearer your objectives, the easier it is to measure and understand what success looks like. So as a starting point, with influencer marketing, we would say define your goals and define your target audience as well. And I've got to test you here, Chris. We need to think smart in terms of our goals and objectives.
Specific, measurable, actionable, results.
Relevant.
Oh, bollocks.
Relevant and time bound.
Timely, not time bound.
Well,
timely.
it's the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
And
do I pass or is that a fail?
yeah, I'll give you an 8B for that.
Thanks.
So define our goals and target audience and be smart about them. And we would encourage you to be as specific as possible. So, do you want to increase website referrals by 30%? And the more specific you can be, the easier it is to actually measure. So some of our typical influencer goals that we see, things like brand awareness, sales, it might be engagement. I mentioned this earlier, it might be showcasing the brand from a new perspective. So you might just be interested in kind of presenting the brand through the eyes of the consumer or through the eyes of a skilled content creator.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, be very, very specific. And then that allows you to track and measure results really effectively. The moment you don't have these clear objectives, you've got no idea what you're going to measure. And therefore, you've got no idea if what you're doing actually works or not.
So tip 2 then, tip 2 we've put in here is finding the right influencers for your brand. So I talked about influencer mapping before, and that's what we're talking about here. Like the key thing is, Will was talking about budgets earlier. You can still do influencer marketing for nothing. Like if you're in-house, you've got, we work with a number of charities ourselves. We help charities. We've got a charitable a preferential rate, and we do some pro bono work as well. But if you're a charity, for instance, and you haven't got a lot of money and you want to do some influencer marketing, hopefully you can find someone that will work alongside you because the fit is authentic, and you find someone that the charity would be relevant to. And often that can be the ideal, but it's about mapping out the right influencers for you.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to really putting the work in when it comes down to researching who they are. And I think it's sometimes tempting to kind of, there's quite a lot of influencer lists going around, isn't there? Of, the generic mum influencers, the generic interior influencers. I would always say dig deeper than that and go for that kind of authenticity. So there's people that genuinely have something to say, could genuinely work with your brand in an interesting and engaging way. And guess what? Consumers will spot that. The moment you're inauthentic about it, people will spot that a mile off.
We've got some research here that said 75% of creators are only interested in working with brands that align with their core values. So it's not just you that are looking for influencers that align with your values. The influencers themselves are looking for... So if you can open your pitch with that, use a bit of chat, get creative, use ChatGPT to write you a personalized approach as to why they should work with you and what you'd like their help to do. But try and get it as authentic as possible. Do your own research, map out who these influencers are that you want to work with. Why should they work with you? And then do a nice little personalized approach. As I say, that'll work a lot better if it's authentic. So then, that I can hear you screaming at the end of your headphones, wherever you are, in the gym, in the car, or whatever. How the hell do I find the right collaborators, Will? How do they find them?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think it's tempting to kind of go through the path of least resistance sometimes, isn't it? And do a quick Google search and find a list of influencers in interiors or mum influencers or whoever it might be. But
you're doing a lot of influencers with mum work here, right? Yeah, you're doing a lot of mum.
That used to be the original mum bloggers, wasn't it?
Yeah, mum bloggers was the first ones.
And then dad bloggers came out after that when everyone realised there's a bit of money in it. But the point is, if you go for the obvious, you're going to be competing against a lot of brands. These people are going to be approached all the time. They're going to probably have fairly high rates because they're used to being approached. You need to dig a little bit deeper. First of all, authenticity and brand affinity. So how relevant and fitting are they for you as a brand? Could you see them working with you? Have you looked at some of their other content, and do they share your values? Have they actually got engagement? It's not uncommon for influencers to either not get much engagement or to actually use bots. And that's luckily dying out now a bit, isn't it? Because it's quite easy to discover using various third-party tools if people's engagement is real or not. But people need to be getting engagement, and their audience needs to be relevant as well. Now, their audience is never going to be 100% relevant to your brand. So we would say probably 60 to 70% audience relevance is about right. And if your chosen influencer broadly ticks these 3 boxes, then you're onto a bit of a winner. And ultimately, you need a list of about 10 to 15 influencers. So yeah, quite time consuming, but time well spent.
Yeah, good one. So tip 3, go for the win-win.
What does that mean then, Chris?
Well, you've got to look at ways to add value to influencers and the people that they reach. Well, everybody should get something out of an influencer program. The audience, the influencer, and the brand. Said Brian Solis, not me, from the Ultimate Group.
So what that means is not just a case of turning up to an influencer with a suitcase full of cash, is it? It's about working with them, and it might not even involve cash. It might get them, it might involve them gifting them a product,
tickets.
It's working with them in a creative way so that they can work with you, you can work with them, and they ultimately create some sort of interesting, engaging content.
Not too prescriptive either.
Yeah.
So give them flexibility to do what they do. Don't prescribe exactly what they've got to do. Work with them so they get to use their creative. They're the creators at the end of the day. They're the ones that do the amazing content.
That's a good point, isn't it? And I think the bolder brands will literally give an influencer carte blanche to do what they want. And if you choose the influencer correctly, you've done your due diligence, and they're a skilled content creator, then why would you try and influence? I mean, it's okay to say, if you refer to our brand, refer to it in this way, but it needs to be a very loose set of guidelines, doesn't it? And trust them to create. Ultimately, they know what works for their audience better than what you do, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Bit of an example of this kind of win-win. We work with a energy drink brand, and we have all sorts of different tiers of influencers. We have kind of what we call ambassadors, who are kind of commercial arrangements, and they will work with us on an annual basis, and then we'll do kind of always on gifting and things like that. But the point is, we lean on these influencers to create interesting, unique content, and we give them the opportunities to do that. So, for example, we might work with some of our brand ambassadors and invite them to fitness events where they can trial products, but they can also take part in competitive fitness events. And it's an opportunity. We're bringing them a content creation opportunity that they wouldn't necessarily have access to. And that's a really good example of a win-win. It's not just a case of here's some product, feature it. We're actually giving them an interesting, unique experience. And guess what? It means we get amazing content out of the back of it that's authentic and on brand and engaging.
Yeah, and it works because the influencers that you're using are doing exercise, and the drink in question is a pre-exercise product. So if you do it pre-exercise, it gives you extra energy, and you do get better results in the gym. Okay, then. So tip 4. Ooh, get ready for your excitement hat. Here we go.
Our favourite topic.
Ring the bell.
Compliance.
No, I can feel the downloads just dropping off a cliff here now.
Yeah, important though. So recently, the ASA has kind of tightened it. Well, I say recently, it's the last couple of years, but they're really clamping down on this now. So they've reviewed the way influencer content is categorized, and they now consider any influencer talking about a brand that's either a paid relationship or a gifted relationship. They would deem that an ad, and you need to label it as such. And if you don't, they'll come down on you, and they'll go after you as the agency. They'll go after the brand, and they'll go after the influencer. And
we've seen some interesting. So to give you a bit of an anecdote on that, we had one where a client came to us, and we'd done some influencer marketing for the brand, and a client came to us with an email from the ASA. The client shall remain nameless. And it was an email from the ASA saying somebody has reported this influencer for not using a hashtag spawn or hashtag ad and doing a campaign for you. So the client got it sent to their inbox with a screen grab of this influencer using the product and then not doing that in a story, an Instagram story. So the client got this email and and then they just emailed it straight through to us at Prohibition. So obviously I'm the lead on the account. I see it, I'm like, oh my God, can I check the processes that we've gone through here? And can we just check that we followed due diligence here? Yes, we'd done a contract, listed out exactly, that they had to say ad and spawn. And actually, they did use ad and spawn. Hashtag had and spawn in the story. And what happened was this influencer, who was massive, by the way, millions, had a small group of trolls who didn't like said influencer. And so they would go out to try and get this influencer in trouble. And what she'd done was photoshopped the two hashtags out and then sent it to the ASA as a complaint, which to me was just... There's people out there on the internet that do these things just to get people because they're successful at being an influencer. It was quite sickening, but I tell you what, having a clear process in your influencer marketing matters because that just immediately got rid of the ASA and we were compliant and we had because what we'd done was every time one of our campaigns is running, when the stories were going up, we were screen grabbing them. So we had the proper screen grab, not the edited one that was sent. We sent it through, and hey presto. Thank Christ that didn't appear on this podcast about fuck-ups.
But that said, the ASA found that nearly a quarter of influencer stories were technically adverts, but only 35% were correctly labelled. So despite all of this, there's still an awful lot of influencers out there not correctly labelling their...
So we had a client, Stockwell Park, who we helped get some influencers along. to the park to review a play area. It was a huge play area that they'd launched. Amazing venue that Prohibition had launched for them. And we got some influencers along, but actually we did it organically. So we did some work and we got influencers, but some influencers were attending because it's an amazing place to go. And we're writing about when they went anyway, just with their family, nothing, not as part of that. But so where does that sit, William, in what you're saying? Because it wasn't part of our campaign.
Well, it's a tricky one. I mean, according to the ASA, any time an influencer has received a product,
which they didn't on that occasion,
right? I think
they'd gone off their own back.
You could probably argue that, but even if you give somebody a £1 can of energy drink, that's deemed an advert and they need to label it as such.
But what I'm saying is that there's a few influencers that went off their own back, bought their kids tickets, took them, and they went and just did Instagram reels and stuff. Now, that's organic content for them. Yeah. It was nothing to do with the fact that it wasn't a part of the campaign. So it's just interesting when you're saying, I think that maybe the content, because people are just they need content, don't they? Creators at the end of the day. If
they've bought their own tickets, then it's legit.
Game, yeah.
I mean, go on. I would say go on the ASA website. There's a quite a comprehensive guide, isn't there, to how you should work with influencers and how you should label it.
We've had to read it. I mean, make sure we're compliant.
The summary is use hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored, hashtag gifted, whatever it is. Ideally, several of them on any post, and the onus is on you really as a brand, isn't it? It should be, you should put this requirement in the contract. We're going to come on to contracts in a minute, but when you do your influencer contract or influencer agreement, you have to put it in the contract. So you then shift the onus to the influencer, but it's your responsibility as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so micro influencers. So I talked at the beginning about micro influencers and macro influencers. What the hell does that mean? Well, a micro influencer is anybody between 2,500 to 5,000 followers, and a macro influencer is anything above 100,000. And I would argue that this is slightly different now because there must be a third level now, because that's quite a jump from 5,000 to 100,000.
Yeah, you can have mid-tier as well. I mean, the point is, macro influencers are your big ticket influencers. Often they're celebrities in their own right. They might be
Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, they could have been on TV or reality TV or whatever. Micro influencers tend to be the much more niche networked individuals, and this particularly is relevant for B2B, isn't it? When you're working with people that might not have a massive reach, but actually the people they do reach, they're highly respected by, and they've got high engagement.
Are you a macro or a micro then, Will?
I'm probably just below micro influencer, actually, if I'm honest, with my 787 Twitter followers and my 3 posts in the last year.
So we got some data here from Trend.io data. So this is 2023's data. It's based on data from our network. We see engagement rates from micro-influencers in the 7% to 20% range. So that's micro-influencers, 7% to 20%. Macro-influencers are lucky to get any engagement around 5%. So there's quite a difference there. You get 20% on a micro. So your bang can be a lot better for your buck if you've got a lot of micro influencers rather than 1 or 2 big where you want to spend all your money.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the other point is, your macro influencers, you're going to get a huge amount of wastage, aren't you, with your audience?
Yeah.
You might be looking at 5% relevance in the audience.
That's back to the Kim Kardashian teeth whitening tweet.
She's featured a lot in this podcast, hasn't she, Kim Kardashian? And the other point is...
can we feature on her podcast now?
Yeah, we'll see. The budget issue, if you work with 10 micro influencers, you might be paying a few £100 to work with them or gifting product.
Yeah.
And actually, collectively, that's probably going to reach the same audience as one big hit macro influencer. So actually, the smart brands are looking at how they can work with a higher volume of micro influencers and saving a huge amount of budget.
Tip 6 then, demonstrating impact.
Yeah, this actually links to one of the early challenges that we mentioned, that people can't kind of demonstrate the value of what they're doing, and I think that can be quite disheartening as a marketer, can't it? You persuade the board that you want to do an influencer campaign
or a podcast.
You deliver it. You feel like it's probably gone quite well, but then actually, what's it achieved?
Debatable.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a challenge I think we hear a lot of, isn't it? You persuade the board to invest in an influencer campaign, but actually, can you measure the effectiveness of it? Has it increased market share? Has it sold any product? And that can be a challenge, and it can be quite disheartening.
So how do you see real results? We've got 4 things here. So you need to monitor and measure your influencer performance. So request access from the influencer to see what you can get.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? And I think the relationship between agency or brand and influencer is now a lot more open, and we can ask to see their analytics. And typically, even at the auditing stage, you can ask to see their analytics. You can get a steer on what brands they work with, what results they've got from other branded partnerships, what kind of engagement they get. And if an influencer isn't willing to share that, then I wouldn't work with them.
No, definitely not. Number 2, you can use UTM tracking. So you can add UTM tracking to a link, so you can make that link more trackable through Google, so you can see how many people have clicked it, shared it, whatever. You could consider, point 3 is to consider trackable codes, or point 4, you can actually explore affiliates. We had a little discussion this morning about a great influencer marketing campaign delivered by Stanley just recently, which is around the Stanley Cup, which was really impressive. And they've asked influencers just to go out and use this new cup that they've had designed to target a new market. It used to be Stanley used to target the male market, and now it's gone out to a female market. And they've been using influencers of all ages and all demographics, TikTok, to expand it, and it has just been phenomenal. So massive round of applause to that campaign, because it looks great, and for a brand like that's quite manly, like Stanley. Well, hey, manly like Stanley, like a brand that's manly like Stanley. I thought they've done a great job of that. It looked really great, and the final point I want to make on that is that they explored affiliates. So they've tied affiliate codes and affiliate tracking in with the influencer marketing. So the more things that are sold, the more money the influencer gets for endorsing the product, which is a key way to get results, and it will.
Yeah, absolutely. And that campaign, I mean, do look it up, or we'll share it in the show notes. Brilliant campaign. Also, it shows the impact of having a brilliant product, doesn't it?
And Stanley, if you're listening, can you send us a few Stanley cups, because we'd like to keep our beer cold.
Can you put beer in it?
Yeah, can you put beer in it? I think you can. Yeah.
I'd have thought so.
Okay.
And the important thing here is, you're measuring the right things because you've got really clear objectives, but you need to learn from the measurements, and you need to constantly kind of learn and refine. And the idea is, the more you measure, the more you can learn about what does work and what doesn't work. And then it just means you can be more effective and better at what you do in the future.
So what's tip 7 then, Will?
Right. This is a particular kind of soapbox issue for us, isn't it? I think it's about being creative and being integrated. So we'll explore what we mean by this. I think there's a danger with influencer marketing to be very tactical, isn't there? And you can kind of rely on the idea of, let's just gift a load of influencers our product. And I think we can be better than that, can't we, as marketers?
Well, we should be more strategic. Yeah, I think so. The more strategic you are with it, the better the result you're going to get from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on that point, why not think of a bigger creative campaign and involve influencers in that?
Yeah.
Rather than influencer relations working in a silo, absolutely incorporate influencer relations into your big creative hero brand campaigns that you might deliver once or twice a year. A few other points on this. Certainly, leverage different platforms in different ways. And again, this is an issue we talk about all the time. Audiences will be different on different social media platforms. There shouldn't be one size fits all, and what we mean by that is the way we work with influencers on TikTok should be slightly different from the way we might work with influencers on YouTube, or the way we work with influencers on Instagram. And each of them will naturally want to present the product or your brand in different ways. Different things will work on those platforms, and we should encourage that. One size fits all means you end up with something very beige. Beige.
So, Will, what about TikTok then?
Well, TikTok's an interesting one. I mean, it's obviously a massively growing channel in terms of that kind of entertainment content piece. We've already talked about how TikTok is directly linked to e-commerce, but the other big kind of growth area on TikTok is influencers and the way influencers are using it. And I think, again, probably 12 months ago, people weren't quite sure how to use this channel, but now it absolutely should be a key kind of platform, shouldn't it, when it comes to your influencer marketing strategy?
Oh yeah, I mean it's still the channel that's growing mentally, and the algorithm just sends you down so many rabbit holes, as I said earlier. So let's look at some statistics then. It's got huge reach, as I just said. 40% of TikTok creators have more than 500,000 followers.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are insane on TikTok, aren't they? And I think it's one of those channels where you can still get that magic organic engagement.
Yeah, from a video,
Yeah.
you don't need followers. It's
Yeah.
about the algorithm, really. You get a
Yeah.
great idea and a great. That's what I love about it. It's still about. It's like when social media was cool. When social media was about organic, great ideas rather than fucking paying for it. It's like it's still back to if you've got a great idea for a stupid video that's quite funny, it'll go viral.
Yeah, you can get 1 million video views without even trying.
Yeah.
If you shoot the right piece of content. Are they going to throttle that back though? Surely 3-4 years time, we're not going to be getting the same organic reach, are we?
Well, no, when you're using paid ads on TikTok, it's the same sort of thing. You can do all the other things like you could do with paid social on Meta and the other platforms. So obviously you can enhance a video to get more, maybe the snippets for this show. I might stick, some money behind that and get more engagement on the video for that. So there is that. But what I like about TikTok is it's still got that organic element to it. And it's also the other reason why I still like Instagram. Like Instagram's still organic. There is still organic reach. That's why Instagram's done well. That's why Facebook and other platforms, not to go on my bloody soapbox, though, I think if you haven't got organic engagement, you've lost what your platform's about.
I suppose the point is about the quality of content. I mean, the reason Facebook, one of the reasons of money, started throttling that back was because a lot of people were sharing sales irrelevant or sales content on there. So it's trying to filter out the less commercial content. And I wonder if TikTok will get to that point where people do realize we're still in the gold rush, aren't we, for TikTok?
Yeah.
And we won't be forever soon.
So what's next then? How to take your influencer relations to the next level, Will? Tell us all about this.
Good question. Well, there's a few things you can do. First and foremost, and we always talk about strategy, but you need to revisit your influencer strategy. So we talked about understanding where influencer relations sits within your broader marketing strategy. If you haven't got a marketing strategy, don't worry, because a lot of people haven't updated it in the last 6 to 12 months. But we need to understand what we want influencer relations to achieve, and particularly we talked about our kind of goals and objectives. Do you want to present your brand or reposition your brand? Do you want to sell product? Do you want to generate an increased share of voice in the market? And then we need to come up with some great ideas for them. And again, I think we need to challenge ourselves to look beyond influencer gifting. I think that's
Campaigns, creative campaigns.
Yeah, and
ideas,
and that's going to engage influencers. The more creative execution. If you're going to invite influencers to some unique event to test your product, you're going to get a much better result than if you're just mailing them out, an opportunity to test your product. So great activations. And then investing the time in influencer mapping. I think it's tempting to screw up on this stage, but ultimately you need to be finding those right influencers that are absolutely perfect for your brand. And then finally, as with everything, measure, do more of what works, less of what doesn't work, and then scale your efforts. So don't try and boil the ocean, start small and then build on it.
Don't stop.
Like that.
Yes. I love that. Don't boil the ocean.
We've tried.
Where's that come from? Boil the ocean?
Up there, mate. Just
That's why I work with him, guys. He's inspirational. Remember, what works today doesn't work for tomorrow. Very true, but based on the organic engagement that we just talked about, when we started out in social, it was 100%, and as we just covered with Meta, it's now 0.01%. So what worked then does not work now.
Yeah, come winter, there'll be 3 or 4 algorithm updates per platform. There'll probably be a new social network emerging. You need to be very, very on it, don't you? And you need to be very responsive and reactive in terms of what's happening. I mean, how do you stay on? How can you possibly stay on top of every development? No one's got time to read Social Media Examiner every day.
No.
What have they?
Well, you have to keep on top of what's coming out. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on the Twitter rebrand, but I think that's for another day and it's quite interesting what your perspective is on that, but we'll cover that. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot going on, and there's always a lot going on because it's a changing marketplace. There's Threads, there's lots of different platforms, and I'm sure there's already influencers on Threads, but I've noticed that some of the criticism of Threads now, it's fun. That's finding its way as well, but that's a whole...
The world's biggest dead social network.
We'll
see.
We'll see.
Fine. So, yeah, the other thing worth mentioning actually is, particularly on TikTok, it's about understanding what works at that moment in time on the platform, and that's typically driven by trending content, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the nature of trending content is it's not trending for long, so you need to absolutely be on top of what's happening and jump on those trends as quick as possible.
So there's our hacks for 2023-24 on influencer marketing. We've also got what we call a discovery session. What's that, Will? You can book a discovery session with me or you.
Yeah, with the
We'd love to meet you.
the host of the podcast.
Yeah, also we'd love to meet everybody out there.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
maybe not everybody at the same time. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Whole two of you.
We're hoping, listening to this or having watched their webinar, you're going to be sufficiently intrigued into what influencer marketing can actually do for your brand. So what we've got is what we call a discovery session, which is basically a 15-minute diagnostic where we hear about your challenges. And on that call, we can actually share with you some strategies, some approaches, some tricks, and some ideas, quite honestly, into how you can use influencer marketing. And as part of that as well, we've also got some exclusive templates as well. So we talked about influencer contracts. We've got one of those, and we've also got a briefing sheet as well to help you actually work with influencers in a way that's compliant. So that's 15 minutes, and there's a link we're going to share in the show notes where you can book that in if you're interested.
Yeah, it's bit.ly/sociallyua. That's bit.ly/sociallyua to book a discovery session with me or Will.
So Chris, slightly different format this week. We've had no guest, but it seems a shame not to talk about fuck-ups. And I don't believe you've actually shared your fuck-up of your career so far, have you? So do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was when I first met you, actually, and I invited to work together. I think that's the biggest fuck-up of my personal career. No, honestly, it's a pleasure to work with you, as you know, my friend. My biggest fuck-up has got to be, I've worked in PR since I went to university, did public relations. Then I got a job in London. I went to work for an international PR agency in London. Did 4 or 5 years down there. Worked in healthcare PR. Came up to the north and got an account manager job in Leeds, which is where Prohibition's based, north of the UK. Bit cocky, account manager. Been travelling for a couple of months. Was ready to take on my new job with my new Thailand tan, and I got the new job, and it was a network agency. The shall remain nameless, but if you went on my LinkedIn profile, you'd be able to narrow it down. They were a networked agency. So I was in the Leeds office, and there was like 7 or 8 of us in the Leeds office. And it was a network agency. So we had a Leeds, London, Edinburgh, Manchester, Glasgow, all over the UK basically. And we had an account, and it was for a alcohol brand, and they were launching a new bar in the Northeast. And I was really excited about this. It was a great consumer brand. Brilliant. I can get stuck in here. And I had to write the story based on a brief that I'd taken from the London office. And they said, can you write this release about this new bar that's opening? It's a new bar for our chained bar. And can you do it? I said, okay. So I wrote the story, put all my effort into it, sent it down to the office for approval. And about a couple of hours later, I get an email back from the account director in London. This is great. Good to go. Brilliant. So enthusiastic 25-year-old Chris thinks, right, I'm going to smash this. This is the first project that I can do and show these guys how good I am at media relations. So I start sending it out and get the couple of execs I'm working with, and we're on the phones all day. The next couple of days, send it out everywhere. It's gone everywhere, like literally everywhere. Anyway, this was on like Wednesday, and on Friday lunchtime I got an email, ping, into my Outlook, and it said, hi guys, just to let you know, don't send that across to the client for approval. There's a bit of a technical issue. So I was like, client approval, is the email good to go? Doesn't mean to go out then? And it turned out that I hadn't been briefed properly but it was my fuck up. So I did what I can do as being an honest, brave individual. I stuck my head in the sand and hoped it all blew over. And so I went to my in-laws for the weekend with my wife, my now wife, at the time was my girlfriend, was sat in their house, and on the 10 o'clock news came this story. It was at this bar opening, and there was a big hoo-ha because the locals were not happy about the rebranded name of the bar. It was
the fear of seeing that appearing.
I literally thought in my first weekend I'd done such a good job I was going to get fired. So to everybody out there, I apologise for sending that release out too early. I was just keen to get going. But luckily I survived, and I'm here to do this podcast with you today. And that's basically it for influencer marketing. Obviously, this is just a snapshot of what we cover in the webinar, as Will's alluded to. But yeah, thanks for listening and downloading the podcast. We appreciate every single comment we get. I know you've got other things to do and listen and get on with your lives, but if you can leave us a review or just a thumbs up would be great. And if you've got a fuck up to tell us, please send it over because we'd love to hear it and share it on the show. And until then, keep fucking up. See you later.
Thank you for listening to Socially Unacceptable. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a 5-star review. Don't forget to follow us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at Prohibition PR. We would love to hear some of your career fuck-ups so we can share them on the show. For more information on the show, search Prohibition PR in your search engine and click on podcasts. Until next time, please keep pushing the boundaries and embracing the socially unacceptable.